welcome. You're watching the Newshour Agenda. I'm Padmaja Joshi. If you've been deluged by information through the day about this very, very grim face-off that we've had between India and China and are confused or you have no idea about what's really happening at Ladakh, at the LAC, let me first start by telling you the exact details of the sequence of events. The MEA has put out a statement which is the most conclusive information on what really happened. They've said that India and China discussed the de-escalation through diplomatic and military channels. Then there was another round of meeting that took place between other commanders to ensure that the agreements that have been reached upon by senior commanders, the senior commanders had a productive meeting on the 6th of June and agreed on a process for such de-escalation. However, the statement by the MEA goes on to say that while it was their expectation that this would unfold smoothly, and ground commanders also met to ensure that consensus was implemented smoothly, what happened? We are learning now that there are massive casualties that have taken place on both sides. 43 casualties on the Chinese side, and as opposed to what the 3 details that we had earlier, now there are 43 casualties, or rather 43 people who've either been killed or who are injured. Let's get a breakup from Rahul Shivshankar joining us now. Yes, Rahul.
Thanks indeed, Padmaja. Yes, highly placed sources in government have told Times Now that that number of casualties, now casualties includes both the dead and the injured, some critically on the Chinese side is about 43. That's the number that has been communicated to us. So this clearly tells you that the scale of this conflagration, if you may, or if you will, was quite large. Now, we have been already told that there were a large number of Chinese troops that suddenly descended upon the Indian group, that the patrol party that was out there trying to ascertain if the Chinese had actually vacated the promised part of the Galwan Valley from where they were supposed to retreat and de-escalate. And when they didn't, the Indian patrol party confronted the Chinese, at which point they descended in large numbers and tried to target the CEO of our company first and succeeded in surrounding him. But very quickly, this escalated into a scuffle, fight, and obvious conflagration between two sides at a very, very big level, which led to a large number of casualties. I've been also told that a large number of Chinese actually fell into the river also in the action. So basically this area, a very precarious area along the sides of a hill with jagged rocks and a fine ridge line. And these individuals in the scuffle were bashed, beaten and pushed, and some of them rolled down the hillsides, taking with them debris, rocks, etc. that obviously injured them fatally. And the numbers are being put at 43 casualties, both deaths and injuries. It's, as I told you, Padmaja, some of these people would have suffered head injuries. Therefore, it is very difficult to exactly put a number, but 43 is the number which is quite specific.
Since you spoke about the lay of land, I want to pull up those visuals again of the Galwan Valley area. The kind of topography that it has. This is the general area, not the exact spot where the clash happened, but this is the Galwan Valley. Take a look at these pictures and you get an idea of what that area looks like. You have the river and you've got sharp peaks on both sides. It is on one of those ledges that this confrontation allegedly took place. Now, this is the map that we are showing right now. This flashpoint places it in respect of where the LAC is, and what we'd like to point out, contrary to what China seems to be suggesting, Rahul, that Galwan is well within Indian territory. This is not a disputed area. The familiar refrain of there is a misunderstanding about what is Indian territory, what is Chinese territory, it doesn't apply here. Galwan is India. It's Indian territory.
Absolutely, Padmaja. This misconception of where the LAC lies doesn't apply to Galwan. This has never actually been claimed by Chinese as their territory. It is very firmly within the LAC on our side, and Indian troops have always had a presence there, and in fact were obviously taken aback when the Chinese intruded and tried to claim it as their own. And even if you look at the statement that was released by the Chinese Western Command theater spokesperson, he made a very stringent comment suggesting that Galwan was actually Chinese territory. So they have tried to alter the status quo in this particular area, and when they were caught out, they were asked, as part of the long negotiations that took place at commander level and higher in the military, major general level, to pull back from that position. And the Indian side, when they went to verify whether the Chinese were complying with their side of the bargain, found them still there. And that's why this conflagration opened up and resulting in these casualties.
So intercepts are now revealing that Chinese side has suffered 43 casualties, including dead and seriously injured in face-off in the Galwan Valley. Many also suggesting that they could have suffered serious head injuries. Rahul, stay on with me, because I again want to take our viewers through the area that we are talking about. And this is very important, because see where the LAC lies. And here you had Galwan. Why is China so upset? China is upset because of this road that you see on your television screens. It's the DSDBO road. It's critical for India because it connects Leh to the Daulak Bed Oldie. It's the highest advanced landing strip which is operated by India. It's highest anywhere in the world. And now the travel time between Leh and DBO has been reduced to 6 hours. So we've built that road. It's a 323-kilometer road. And that is what has upset the Chinese greatly. So they have come, they are sitting at Galwan, they are sitting on our land, and now they think they can push India around. India is no pushover. Also, what are you hearing about the latest from the meeting that has happened between the EAM, the Prime Minister, the Defence Minister, Rahul?
Well, Padmaja, of course, that meeting is now concluded, and the first bit of information that came out was, of course, on the casualties. So that's been communicated to us. Obviously, the Prime Minister has been briefed on the exact nature of this conflagration, the casualties, the reasons, and the trigger for it. And that also, of course, resulted in the statement that was put out by the MEA. The MEA has come out and also defended the words that have been used. Some experts have come out and picked holes in some of the phrases that were employed. For example, Kamal Sibbal had come out a little earlier and stated that the word avoidable Indian casualties should not have been used, because it suggests that, you know, we are dismissing the deaths rather casually on our side. But I was specifically told that that word was used to emphasize the fact that the Chinese are the transgressors, they are to blame. So this was communicated to the Prime Minister. India
even now is asserting that we are on our land, we are adhering to past treaties and understandings, and China is going on and on saying that it was a provocative attack by India on Chinese troops. Various people within China have said that India has, quote-unquote, illegally crossed the border twice, and that India should avoid, quote-unquote, unilateral action that may complicate the situation, and that India should restrict its frontline soldiers. The thing is, if China cannot be trusted to honor agreements reached by their own military commanders, then how can any talks go forward? And that's the question I'm taking across to our panel now. Remember, it was a series of talks. It was agreed upon de-escalation, and despite that, the horrific events of last evening have taken place. Joining us now, Jeeval Narasimha Rao, MP and National Spokesperson of the BJP, Lieutenant General Satish Dua, former Chief of Integrated Defence Staff, Colonel S. Dini, he's in fact been a CO in that area of the Pangong Tso Battalion, Manu Pavi, Senior Editor of Economic Times, N.R. Tanjan, Political and Economic Affairs Commentator, joining us live from Beijing, along with Andrew Leung, International and Independent China Strategist, joining us live from Hong Kong. And I want to ask you first, Andrew, how is it possible that when you have agreed upon de-escalation, this unprovoked attack takes place?
Well, there seems to be a disagreement on the facts between the Indian side and the China side. Let's face it, I mean, both sides, both nations are very strong powers. And both are, of course, proud of it, the people proud of their own country. And then there's a rise of nationalism, and also the sense of territorial integrity is also very strong on both sides. But it's remarkable that in spite of all these border disputes, for 30 years, 30 years, not a single bullet has been fired because the border disputes have been managed very, very carefully on both sides. And that's why all these mechanisms for dialogue, for discussions exist. And that's why there is a mechanism for commanders
But
on the
Mr.
ground.
Leung, the entire mechanism was adhered to. I will ask you this very bluntly because India today is very, very angry. Is this not a betrayal of ethics and diplomatic behavior by China? There have been diplomatic talks, there have been military level talks, and it's not between small fry. There have been corps commander level talks, and yet this happens. It's a transgression of every understood international practice.
Well, of course, I mean, territorial sort of transgression is a very serious matter for any country, China and India included. But I think that it's necessary to agree on the fact. If the fact cannot be agreed on the ground, then it's necessary to escalate the talk, the dialogue, to possibly the highest level between Prime Minister Modi and President Xi if necessary. And I think that what both countries don't want is actually a war. I think it benefits neither. And there's all this macho rhetoric, which I heard from another station. It's not very counterproductive.
Sir, nobody wants a war. My simple question is, and that is where I want to bring in Lieutenant General Dua as well. If India wanted war, there would have been no talks, General Dua. But if we've carried on talks for the last 1.5 months, what explains this kind of action by China? Is it wrong to call it subterfuge? What other word can you use for it?
Let me put the things in right perspective. Galwan, where we've seen this incident occur, is not one of those 23 mutually agreed to areas of dispute between the two countries. So it's obvious that in the area of Galwan, there is something that is bothering the Chinese side a little more than usual. We know the importance of this DSDBO road, to which China has been objecting. China has created road infrastructure right up to the borders long before Indian side even started. We started a little late for different reasons. I won't expand the discussion now. So when we are trying to narrow the mobilization differential on the border, that means when our forces mobilize and theirs mobilize, we take longer because our infrastructure is not good. It irks China. And the importance of this road that leads up to DSDBO, you brought it out yourself a little while ago in the news. So what I'm trying to get at is that this is not just any other face-off that has been happening for several years. It is assumed strategic importance. And when de-escalation or was in process, when talks had taken place for the first time at a lieutenant general level, at that moment, during that de-escalation, incident like this to happen, and then brazenly and blatantly saying that it is Indian side which has crossed over to their territory and then caused this incident, I think is something that we need to look at.
Mr. Tangent, it's brazenness, nothing short of that.
All right. Could you repeat the question?
My question is that
your allegation that somehow this was a violation of the contract. So could you read me the clause, and whether it's in Hindi or Chinese, that says that all of these things are going to happen? Second, this issue about trying to make this into a big incident, both sides, Indian and Chinese, claim that the other is in the wrong. The larger issue here is how these two great powers are going to get along.
Are you saying that Galwan Valley is still in dispute? Is that what you're saying?
Obviously, that's what the Chinese are saying. Otherwise, they wouldn't be there.
I'm sorry, but we cannot let this go unchallenged. Just a second. Just a second. Colonel Dinny, no, I'm sorry. I cannot let that go unchallenged. Colonel Dinny, is there any dispute about the Galwan Valley? Let's be very clear about that.
Absolutely. As General Dua as you are rightly mentioned, that out of the disputed territory which we have acknowledged between the two, Galwan does not come into even into that. So there is no question that there has been a dispute in Galwan prior to this.
Okay, I think we have a huge issue with that audio with Colonel Denny. Can we please just fix that? It's really disingenuous, G.V. Narasimha Rao, at this time, for China to now turn around and say, oh, I'm sorry, this is because this unprovoked aggression has taken place because you are on our land. This is like saying if we call an apple orange long enough, it'll turn into an orange.
But Padmaja, I think it's nothing but disingenuousness, as you said, or deceit. In fact, India has all along considered even Aksai China as a part of India's territory, which illegally was occupied by China, and which led to this conflict in 1962. So certainly our position today is even Aksai China is a part of India's territory. So anything on this side of the LAC, India is not going to countenance, not going to allow any kind of aggression by China. And last night's this incident happened mainly because they insisted on setting up a post on our side of the LAC. And this is what, which was a complete betrayal of the agreement between the two generals, between the two military establishments. So China must understand this is new India. This is not Nehru's India.
Mr.
And
Tangent.
certainly India will do everything to ensure that its
You keep
territorial
referring to an agreement.
is maintained.
Can you tell me, can you read from the agreement that was reached between these two generals? Was it in Chinese or was it in Hindi?
Sir, okay.
Do you
so,
have a copy of it?
all right, Manu Pabi, would you like to take that
Then why
question?
do
So
you
we
keep
have Mr.
insisting
Tangent
that
saying
it was violent?
there was no agreement. We never agreed to de-escalate. We never agreed to move back. Show me a copy of that agreement. Was it in Indian? Was it in Hindi? Was it in Chinese? Can you please tell
Well,
Mr.
that's
Tangent
my
what the
point
agreement
exactly.
reached was?
You've just proved my point. There were talks going on.
Sir,
Obviously, they
sir,
were not.
I'm
They
certain-
did not reach agreement.
I'm certain as an experienced commentator, you know far better than me that there is never a copy or a handwritten copy or a printed copy of any agreement reached upon. But
Hey,
if you're
then-
saying
then
that
don't
these
start
talks
talking
didn't
about
happen and
how
there's
this
no
was
agreement,
violated.
then I really have nothing
I'm a
more to
lawyer.
add to that.
And you, as a host, know that you cannot mix terms. It might be convenient when you're trying to incite, your audience to believe that something wrong has happened. But if there was, in fact, an agreement, it should have been in writing, and there should have been protocols that would have been followed.
Okay,
Obviously,
I have
the Chinese
absolutely,
side,
with due
that you-
respect, sir,
that
I have
the
no
Indian
interest in
side-
doing any of that. Let's,
the Chinese did.
okay, okay, so there was no understanding, there was no agreement, there was no
I'm asking
de-escalation.
you, where is this understanding that you seem to understand so
Do
well?
you agree that there were talks between the two sides, or were there no talks between India and China?
There are obviously talks, but you keep talking about an agreement. I want to know where that agreement is.
Okay. So Manu Pabi, was there any agreement about de-escalation or was there none? And if yes, where's the copy?
I'm sorry, can you repeat? I can't hear you.
Yes. So Mr. Tangent is saying that there was no agreement between India and China on any kind of de-escalation. So any violation of the agreement, that question does not arise.
I'm very surprised that the Chinese has not read statement from his own foreign office, which has talked about de-escalation and the need for dialogue and peaceful disengagement. I think it's been pretty clear. Enough has been written and said officially by the two sides that things have to be resolved with talks. And what happened yesterday night was certainly not talks. It was an aggressive Chinese behavior on the line of action control. They included, without any doubt, inside Indian territory. They carried out a very atrocious and violent act against Indian soldiers, which was responded to. And I think no one of the same mind can say that the Chinese, didn't have a paper or there was no agreement. If there was an agreement for withdrawal, what were the talks about? What was the official statement about? And its aggressive behavior, is not limited to what's happening in the LAC in India alone. We have seen Chinese action in South China Sea in the past few days. This is a trait which is unfortunately there, which now has to be responded to in a language that the Chinese understand.
Mr. Tangent.
I couldn't quite hear what he said. Just say that China's at fault. My point is, I'm an American. What I'm interested in is exactly how you're coming to all these conclusions and about the factual nature of what happened. Generally, there's a trial or some sort of investigation. But here, just how many hours afterwards, you have absolute certainty what happened. My point is, both sides claim the other is at fault. But there are larger issues here. If India and China are going to continue into the future, India hopefully will have a bright
both sides are not blaming the other. India's stand is very clear over here, Colonel Dinny, that we were willing to negotiate. We had an honorable understanding and a conversation. And this was followed by aggression. Does this happen between two civilized countries?
All I want to say is that yes, there was an unprecedented Lieutenant General level talk which was held, based on after which the talk now was delegated to the colonel and brigadier level on ground so that the de-escalation can start. And at Galwan also, this de-escalation process was being discussed, it was in the process of happening. And then this incident happened, and yet we are still, there are many more details which we require to know that exactly why this trigger happened. And there is no question that the commanding officer being there and the kind of violence which has taken place, it does not happen in the normal times there. There's something which has happened beyond which is in a normal thing. And at the time when this de-escalation process is there is the most surprising thing that how this particular thing has happened. But at this moment, I would not like to speculate more on the exact trigger that how this happened.
No, absolutely. Nobody wants to speculate about the figure. All one is talking is about the posturing of China. You had the Western Theatre commander saying, and I quote, China always owns sovereignty over Galwan Valley region and the Indian border defense troops are inconsistent with their words. Who's being inconsistent over here? Jivel Narasimha Rao. I mean, I can just see one person in the room who's being inconsistent.
No, Padmaja, I think the experts on the panel, especially the foreign experts on the panel, I think they don't seem to have the full clarity on this issue. What we have stated, I'll read out a paragraph, few lines from the MEA statement, Ministry of External Affairs of Government of India. We said there was a consensus reached to respect the line of actual control in the Galwan Valley, and China unilaterally tried to change the status quo there. So obviously, this was in our control. The Galwan Valley, where they tried to set up a post yesterday, was an area under India's control. This was within area of line of actual control. Now you come into territory which is under our control, which we consider, and you have always stayed away from it. Today you try to intrude into our territory and set up a post. We certainly see this as a transgression. What else would you call this?
What would you call it except a transgression, Mr. Tangent?
Well, as I keep trying to say, the Chinese believe it's theirs, you believe it's yours. That's why it's called a dispute. The idea, I mean, I've listened to this argument more.
But sir, you can't just lay claim to somebody's land and then declare unilaterally that it's a dispute.
Well,
our stand has been the same on this area since 1962. Let me read out to you a letter that was written to the Chinese embassy by the Indian MEA way back in 1962, and our stand has remained consistent. The government of India has carefully investigated allegations by China and found them to be without any basis. The GOI notes in this connection that the areas referred to by the Chinese government, and they were talking about the Galwan Valley, lie well within Indian territory. This has been our stand since 1962. Just because you say so...
You're relying on maps drawn by Englishmen who never went there. And that is part of the big issue that is at the heart of what we're dealing with today. The legacy of colonialism.
I mean, I don't believe this. Manu Pabi, basically, so what Mr. Tangent and China are both trying to do, they are trying to redraw maps just by saying again and again that, well, this is not what the LAC is. You are.
Who drew the original maps?
Sir, what is the genesis of this dispute?
No, who drew
What is the genesis of this dispute? How do you say that Galwan Valley is disputed? Can you please tell me the source from which you say that this is disputed?
I'm not saying I own it. The Chinese say it's theirs, you say it's yours.
But what is the basis of this claim? What is the basis of this claim?
The basis of the claim is that there have never been solid boundaries put there. There was a war in '62, as you remember. The Henderson report clearly lays out that China was that India was the aggressor in that. And then,
okay, very quickly, Manu Pabi, respond to that.
Of tit and tat going back year after year. But at this point, you have to admit there are larger issues than that very rugged.
Okay, we've got big news coming in right now. Official statement has come. Indian and Chinese troops have disengaged at the Galwan area where they had earlier clashed on the night of 15th and 16th. Indian troops were critically injured in the line of duty at the standoff location and exposed to sub-zero temperatures in the high altitude terrain have succumbed to their injuries. Killed in action, 20. All right, so 20 soldiers of the Indian Army have been killed in combat, and this was a standoff where 17 Indian troops who were critically injured in the line of duty at the standoff location and exposed to sub-zero temperatures have succumbed to their injuries. Very quickly, let's go across to Navika Kumar. Yes, Navika.
Padmaja, three were the casualties reported in the morning. Now, the official army statement has come in. 17 more have succumbed to the low temperatures when they fell into the stream. So the number of casualties on the Indian side have risen up to 20. That is, and then the disengagement has happened at the Galwan area, where the clashes happened on the 15th and 16th of June. In fact, Indian Army is firmly committed to protect the territorial integrity and sovereignty of the nation, is the statement from the Army that has come in. And sub-zero temperatures in the high altitude terrain has led to the casualties reaching the number of 20. So thanks. That is the Army statement that we have received.
Okay, thanks very much, Navika. Let's stay with that bit of breaking news. Thanks very much, meanwhile, for joining us. General Satish Dua, this is unpardonable, that to have killed 20 soldiers in combat and now claim that this land is ours.
Yes, first of all, it's tough to absorb that we've had 20 casualties. I just heard it along with you. It's a sad development, but that's an occupational hazard. And like Navika said, Indian Army is committed to safeguard our borders, the line of actual control included. This, as we've been discussing over the last 30 minutes, and I've been over a few other channels as well, this, like I said earlier, is not a part of the disputed areas identified by the two countries. Hence, it is all the more reason that there is something that is bothering them, that China now claims that not only is this theirs, they also claim that the Indian forces have gone across to their side, whereas what they've actually gone, where they'd gone for those meetings to ensure that the disengagement that was agreed to on the 6th, those talks, the military level talks, had taken place. So the fact of the matter is that thereafter there was no excuse to have this sort of an action which has led to casualties on both sides. Our figures are huge, and I am sure there will be a befitting response. What that is, the tactical level commanders will decide, because we need to now ensure that we create that at the tactical level some strengths for our forces, so that even if there are talks at any levels, they are from a position of strength, and those leverages will have to be created.
That position of strength will now have to be created, and at the same time, Andrew Leung, you cannot have China rubbing salt into wounds. I mean, after all of this, the Global Times editor said, I want to tell Indian side, don't be arrogant and misread China's restraint as being weak. China doesn't want to have a clash with India, but we don't fear it. This is a threat.
well, I think that you can see that this is a part of a global pushback against China, not only from India, but from the United States and some other countries, because China has now become much more powerful than before, and it's almost natural that even if we become a 10,000-pound panda, you're going to threaten others, right? But I think that as far as this dispute is concerned, I think there are two things that need to be done. First of all, one needs to look at that particular area in question and decide between both sides, possibly between the highest level, between Prime Minister Modi and President Xi, as to whether that particular area falls within the line of control. Secondly, a joint investigation should be conducted into actually what happened, what caused this kind of conflict in the first place. No, I think that, as I said at the beginning, it's quite remarkable that in spite of the border disputes, which have existed for so many years, not a single shot has been fired in spite of skirmishes. But this is truly remarkable. If China wants to go to war with India, or India wants to go with China, a lot of hot war would have taken place.
But with respect, sir, it seems that's the direction that China is trying to push India into.
The dialogue.
And again, Colonel Dinny, the seriousness of what's happened today can't be underlined enough, because for a commanding officer to be killed is almost like someone killing your father.
Absolutely. There is no doubt that the commanding officer of the battalion is not an ordinary rank. He is the soul of the battalion, and there is no doubt that the battalion it affects. And I'm sure the troops would have, it takes time also to come out of it. But definitely, I want to make one point here, that although China has still not brought out what is the casualties which they have from their side, but trust me, what happens there, they would also be having more, if not similar, or but much more than what would have happened, because it is not one-sided there.
In fact, so what we are learning is that they have 43 casualties, people seriously injured, and those who are killed, and which is why in our tangent, this confrontation and this ratcheting up of tensions is not going to help anyone, not even China.
Absolutely. Yes, it doesn't help anybody. See, that is why I said that the clash has happened, because the reaction has been equal. Whatever, now we only know about our own casualties. Yeah. But definitely, I'm very sure that this particular incident, in kind, the casualties would have been on the other side.
So 43 casualties, is it worth it, Mr. Tangent? Yes. 43.
43 casualties, that is a report by your side. As I said, I like to reserve judgment until there are facts that are established and agreed to by both sides. You can jump on and say that I'm right and you're wrong, but I don't know if that's necessarily how you solve a dispute. I mean, right now, everybody else is delighted. That is, it wants to attack China. They say,
but you also don't solve a dispute, Jivel Narasimha Rao, by trying to bully your neighbors. And this is not being seen in isolation. You're doing it in South China Sea. You're doing it to Taiwan. You think you can do it to India. But India is not a pushover.
I'm really surprised, the two experts on the panel from outside, from abroad. Mr. Rainer, do you expect China to be truthful? Have you, if you are an expert on China, can you tell me how truthful is China on anything that you know of? Are they truthful about all data about their economy? Are they truthful about COVID? So I think India is a democratic country. India is very transparent. India puts out every number. We don't hide anything. But the other side, I think you cannot trust them simply with their honesty. I don't know. I would like to get your comment on their integrity, honesty with regard to statistics.
How you're handling COVID-19 versus how China.
Tangent, with due respect, it's not about name calling, but you haven't even put out an official statement about the number of soldiers who are dead or injured on your side. We immediately acknowledge the men that we lost. You haven't even done that, sir.
The Chinese way of handling this was to call your ambassador and make formal representations, not to go to the press and try to inflame the people. If they were in fact trying to use this to somehow divert attention, the first thing they would have done would have a PR barrage, use their newspapers to
but
start talking about
that is exactly what you seem to be doing. Take a look at what people from Global Times are saying, what your Western theatre commander is saying. It almost seems like you're gloating, General Dua. This is not the time for gloating or breastbeating or saying that, we are prepared for war, but we are not going to get into it.
Well, I've heard that from the Indian side many times.
Am I to speak?
So with due respect, nobody from the Indian side has done that. India has been restrained.
No,
India has just put out a statement with the facts, and all that China has done so far is talking about, don't be arrogant and misread China's restraint, saying, oh, we have historical claim over Galwan Valley. That's the kind of response we've got from China, and that also not officially. I don't know what that says. General Dua, this is not the time to be needling your neighbors.
Exactly. So that goes both ways.
General Dua.
Yeah. Okay. What I would like to say is absolutely right. This is not the time to indulge in such theatrics. If a situation which was on the mend has turned ugly, as two mature nations like the panelists, I think Mr. Andrew, he also said earlier, it's remarkable that we haven't fired a shot. But this changes everything. I think it is. This is the time, instead of bro beating or chest beating, chest thumping, this is the time to try and act matured and let things not spiral out of control. What we've been talking earlier, this suddenly changes the complexion. The large number of casualties, it becomes very sensitive. It's a very serious issue. It can just spiral out of control. The time now is, it is time now to somehow establish control over the situation. Otherwise, we in middle of so many other issues that are taking place, we could be looking at some serious developments. So my take is that while I still maintain that we need to create our own leverages, but we need to do that only so that we are talking from position of strength.
Yes, and it's really time for China also to be dialing down the rhetoric, this psychological warfare, this putting out of statements, almost seem to be gloating, bullying your neighbors. That's not going to do anyone any good. Lives are lost on both sides, and that is not the way neighbors can survive. Let's hope tomorrow brings more sanity. Thank you very much, all gentlemen, for having joined me on debate number 1. Well, we've lost 20 precious Indian lives, soldiers killed in combat, and a seething nation is now demanding answers and is also demanding clarity. The opposition is questioning the government's silence, asking what really is going on. While most have asserted that they stand with the country, they have also sought details. Where do we stand? And where do we go next with China? The Congress, for its part, has posed 7 questions, additionally saying that this silence of the government is because this time around, their failure cannot be pinned on anyone else. Okay, joining us now on the debate, G.V.L. Narasimha Rao, MP and national spokesperson of the BJP, continues with us, and we've got spokesperson of the JDS, Tanveer Ahmed. All opposition parties, Tanveer Ahmed, demand answers today. Can you please tell Mr. Narasimha Rao what are the specific questions you want answered?
See, firstly, my condolences are with the brave soldiers who lost their lives, and I know that today the nation got to really stand with as shoulder to shoulder, but it's not political debate. Let G.V.L. Narasimha Rao or BJP not take it politically, but they have to really answer certain questions. Why were they silent for a longer time? Why didn't they really open? Why didn't they take the opposition in confidence? We are Indians. We are as concerned as you are. We want to really stand with our forces, with our nation during this crisis. सी राष्ट्र विवाद और राष्ट्र संवाद एक साथ होना चाहिए, तभी राष्ट्रवाद होता है. इफ एट ऑल वी डोंट स्टैंड ड्यूरिंग राष्ट्रवाद एंड राष्ट्र संवाद, then there is going to be a vivad. Please,
that's
BJP,
a very sensible
wake
thing
up.
to say. Jeevan Narasimha Rao.
China is
surely everyone
not a small
deserves
nation.
clarity. You know, I'm not going to speak for a few people who I have to say have said extremely unseemly things. You know, this is not the time to say, oh, it's 5.6 inches, etc. That's just disgusting. But to raise questions about what really is happening. As a country, everyone needs to know, everyone deserves to know.
No, Padmaja, from time to time, leadership in government or the Raksha Mantri or Chief of Army Staff, they have made statements and they have given clarity that can be given in public domain. And certainly it's a matter of national security. It's certainly opposition has a right to know, but not right to indulge in cynical politics. All that we have seen from some members of the opposition is to only try and indulge in petty politicking, trying to really make cheap comments only to derive some kind of sadistic pleasure. Nothing stops if JDS leader, if Deve Gowda ji, former Prime Minister, wants to know. There is, I think, certainly he can have he will get all the details that he needs from the
when will we hear? I'll be very blunt with you, Jeevan Narasimha Rao. It's been 2 months now. For 2 months, the country was hearing, yes, negotiations are going on. But today, 20 soldiers have died, sir. Leave Tanveer Ahmed. Leave Deve Gowda, leave Congress, leave Rahul Gandhi. I am asking you, on behalf of the family members of these 20 men, what are we going to do? And why did this happen?
No, it happened because we are very serious about protecting India's sovereignty and territorial integrity. This government is not willing to cave in. Unlike in the 60s, we entirely gave up Aksai Chin, although India's parliament passed a resolution. The then Prime Minister Pandit Nehru clearly stated it as a matter of fact, but which is
why they have less than 50 seats. My question to you is that do we deserve a statement? There should be a statement.
There is a statement from his command, Padmaja. These are matters of statecraft. Don't expect everything to be stated in public domain. Let me be very honest with you. But what needs to be disclosed to the public will be disclosed. What needs to be stated in Parliament will be stated in Parliament. And senior leadership from the opposition will certainly be taken into confidence on whatever questions they have.
Will you have an all-party meeting? Today all parties said we need to have an all-party meeting. All-party meeting didn't happen. CCS didn't happen.
If required, I think, you see, this is a matter that needs to be decided by, you have a larger national security interest. At what level this needs to be discussed, who to be taken into confidence, that's entirely the prerogative of the government of the day. You can't have you may not have a meeting with 50 different political leaders. You might, at some point of time, you might want to take a few of them. For example, when we carried out the surgical strikes, Prime Minister spoke to Sonia Gandhi. Prime Minister spoke to Dr. Manmohan Singh, gave details about the activity. So similarly, at what level, at what time?
So Tanveer Ahmed, there'll be a statement in Parliament, but diplomacy and military dialogue cannot be done on national TV, cannot happen on 10 p.m. debates.
Padmaja, I would have really believed my very good friend Mr. GBL Narasimha Rao had really not seen the politicking which is happening of BJP on Twitter and social media. Name calling. Rahul Gandhi, leave Deve Gowda, leave Jawaharlal Nehru. You know, you would really go back and fall on those lines again. Please, 20 soldiers, I think Padmaja rightly questioned. I think those family definitely deserves an answer. If for last 15 days, 20 days, we are sitting, we are discussing, we are deliberating, we are debating, and then today this happens. The nation was absolutely not prepared for this, GBL. And you can't really fool everybody every time. You can't really, in the name of nationalism, really play this, and the nation is going to forgive you. If at all, even now, the time has really not gone. Stop doing name calling to Rahul Gandhi. Stop doing name calling to Rahul Gandhi. Rahul Gandhi is as Indian as you are.
Come on. You have taken names, therefore I am compelled to comment. Otherwise, I would have not done this. The same Rahul Gandhi at the height of Doklam crisis, he was engaging with the Chinese ambassador to India, and that party was lying about it. They said their official spokesperson, their leader of their communications department said this is a lie. And then turned out that Rahul Gandhi was having such private conversations. And Robert Vadra and members of the family were dining and what else I don't know. So this is the level to which opposition stoops. And you have private conversations and you don't talk about this. You don't take the government into confidence about your private talks.
Okay.
This is what happened. Rahul Gandhi, so this government, 20 soldiers have died. I think each one of us is extremely concerned about this. But this has happened after diplomatic engagement. This has happened after military level engagement, after they have agreed to withdraw. This has happened because we did not want to let them, we did not want them to, we did not want to allow them to get away with transgression into our territory.
Tanveer Ahmed, while I appreciate that you are asking for clarity and you are asking for details, but since you spoke on the behalf of Congress and on behalf of Mr. Rahul Gandhi, do you also really think that this is the time to pull down your Prime Minister? When you're eyeball to eyeball with a hostile country who's trying to bully you by saying, oh, he's weakest Prime Minister ever, boss, he's still your Prime Minister. And he will be the one who will run this government for the next 4 years, whether you like it or not. And to tell China at this time, you know what, we think he's the weakest Prime Minister ever. I don't know in which negotiation that's a winning chip to play.
Padmaja, the day you are not capable of handling the seat, the nation would definitely ask you to step down or give it to somebody who's more capable.
In the middle of a crisis, you want the PM to step down.
So that is why this is wishful thinking. No, this is your wishful thinking.
1 second, Padmaja. I think more than the Prime Minister.
No.
More than the Prime Minister,
see, Mr. Tanveer Ahmed, you have now underlined the problem perfectly. I started out by saying the opposition, the country needs to know. But the moment you latch on to a neighbor's transgression to say, you know what, let's pull down this government. This is not the government of Narendra Modi. This is not the government of BJP. This is not the government of Jivel Narasimha Rao. It's the government of India right now, which is negotiating, or rather is standing up to the government of China. You really think, Mr. Ahmed, in the middle of this crisis, it's a good idea to say PM must step down? And then?
Padmaja, internally, whatever happened in the country, we were absolutely still, okay, the jobs gone, the farmer crisis, the COVID crisis, all this. We lost a good friend of us, Nepal. He's definitely looking into our eyes. And it is a failure of the foreign policies of the country. So the Prime Minister definitely, at least now, let the Prime Minister of the country and come and address to the nation, not the monologue. Let there be a press conference. Let the press question the Prime Minister. This is the more time. I think the Prime Minister definitely needs to rise to the occasion. If at all is not doing that, then there would be these questions arise.
Okay.
You see, the opposition doesn't seem to learn lessons, and it's good for us. It's the same old petty politics that they want to play. They tried this when Uri happened. They tried this when Pathankot happened. And how we responded and how people supported our government is part of history. I think this is, in fact, honestly, I'm really saying today it's difficult to trust the opposition. I think the opposition which attacks India's army, which calls Indian Army Chief a Sadaka Gunda, which doesn't accept the bribery of the army in carrying out surgical strikes and Balakot strikes, I really don't think the opposition can be trusted. I think you cannot share everything with them. In fact, there could be many friends of the Chinese among the opposition.
Okay, I don't want to go there because at this time, just like the government is the government of India, this opposition is also opposition of India. And when it comes to the crunch, everyone will have to stand together, whether government or opposition. But there needs to be a more nuanced approach, Tanveer Ahmed. We can't get into, a mud-slinging match at this point. If anything, you'll have China from across the border saying, good thing. They are fighting each other, makes them weaker.
Padmaja, to start with, I told you, this is not the time for politicking. We don't want to do politicking because it's not general election. There's no election.
What is calling Mr. Modi the weakest Prime Minister?
Humble request to the Prime Minister, to the Home Minister.
I mean, you just said, if you don't have a good enough Prime Minister, he should step down. What is that if not politics? Statecraft.
Padmaja, tell us one good thing which has really happened with our neighbors. Tell me one good thing. If at all, if there is a failure in delivery, I think accountability is something which you and I stand for in your employment.
Definitely.
Where you're working. If at all you
and
don't
which is
really
why I am
deliver
asking for accountability. I am asking for answers and I am asking for clarity, just like you are. And that is a completely valid demand. That the country really needs to know what has happened in the last 2 months, what is happening right now, and what are we going to do next. That, I think, is a perfectly valid demand. But to pull down your own country and to pull down your own country's government, that cannot be in any way a wise move to make at this time. Thanks very much. Let's hoping that tomorrow brings better news. It's a better day. Our thoughts, of course, remain with the families of the 20 men that we have lost in combat in Galwan Valley in Ladakh. Don't forget that. Thanks very much, Tanveer Ahmed, Jivel Narasimha Rao, for joining me.